Welcome to Actions and Limits. My name is Justin Atherton. I'm the Peak Performance Consultant for Confidence Unchained. With me as always is Paul Fortune. Paul is a mindset coach and the founder of A Call to Action. And together, we make Actions and Limits. Welcome to the show, the podcast where we talk about the actions we can take and the limits we create. Make sure you subscribe, whether you're watching on YouTube or on your favorite podcast platform. We are on all the number one podcast platforms out there. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook. I think we're on LinkedIn and Twitter and all of these other things. So make sure you follow us at Actions and Limits and stay updated on all our upcoming content. Paul, really glad to have our guest, David Rahman, coming on the show here in a couple minutes. He's a coach, he's an author, he does a lot of different stuff. So I'm excited to pick his brain. I know you and I have been checking out his content over the last couple of days.
Yeah, he portrays himself as a mindset coach, which is obviously what I portray myself as. And a lot of things that he talks about in his book and other podcasts that I viewed him on is similar things that I talk about and what you talk about. It's all kind of similar stuff. It just wrapped in a different package, so to speak. And it'll be great to pick his brain and find out what methods he uses to help his clients and what makes a perfect client for him.
It does seem to be that that's a theme that we've found from doing this show for over a year, is that, you know, all the coaches we talk to, whether they're licensed therapists, whether they're, you know, mindset coaches, performance coaches, coaches for men or women, the foundation of what they talk about is the same stuff. It's about how they word it, like how do they like pitch it to their clients and package it in a way that is going to resonate with their group of people, like with their audience. I know one thing in David's book that stood out to me, he talks about this, you know, emotional rucksack that people carry around with them. I've used the term your emotional backpack. So it's still kind of the same idea that we talk about, just kind of in a slightly different way. And you know, he talks about it in a slightly different context in his book, but I think you're right. You know, there's a set group of these skill sets and mindset, you know, tips that are available to everyone, and each coach shares it in a slightly different way. I know you and I have had this conversation about how each other's coaches on a regular basis.
Yeah, and going back to David, I can hear it in his voice how much he cares about his clients.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going to be great to interview him and find out what his methods are.
Yeah, I'm excited to bring him out. So let's do that. So David Rahman is an inspirational speaker, coach, and author. His passion is to help people all over the world to start loving and believing in themselves. As we live in a world as never seen before, there is an increasing number of people with self-confidence and self-esteem problems. David believes that this has to change and can change. His philosophy is to live in your light, not in your shadow. David has released his book, Let It Go, to help start a movement of change. He believes that if we can let go of things that we have stored in our mental backpack, our life can start changing. Well, David, welcome to the show. We're really excited to have you here on the Actions and Limits podcast, man. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Justin. Thank you.
So Paul and I have been checking out your content, and David, you've got a lot of different stuff going on. How did you go down this path? Like, where did you decide that you wanted to be a speaker, an author, a coach? Like, where did that come from for you, David?
Yeah, sure. It wasn't natural, put it that way.
Sure.
You know, growing up, I had a lot of issues with confidence and self-esteem. And one time or another, I started to get drawn towards psychology and mindset. So that led me to training in it. I used to be an optometrist. So I think you call them eye doctors in the States.
Sure.
But that was never I never felt right in terms of my calling. And yeah, it was a result of just seeing what was out there and what drew me in, and that was coaching. I was back in 2001, and that's when I started looking into training, and it's brought me right here. And speaking was just a byproduct, to be honest. I never wanted to speak. I just felt you could reach out to more people.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah.
Mm.
What was the turning point, David? You got into being an eye doctor, and it wasn't really your passion. Was there something that happened that said, you know what, I really want to explore self-help coaching?
Yeah, great question. It was in the days of the dial-up internet, if you remember. And I found coaching, and shortly after that, my father passed on, 2002, and then my son was born literally 3 months later. So I had a traumatic shift in my life, and then when that happens, it was literally one in, one out, and I just didn't know what to do, and I started reassessing my life, and then I decided, well, what do I want to do? And that was the time, Paul, really, when I thought I just need to change.
Sure. I really like, I was, looking through your book, and you talked about some different ideas that really resonated with me. You talked about your mental rucksack that you carry around with you. Explain that to the audience and what you mean by that, and how that affects people out there.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, when we're born, my idea is when we're born, we're free, and we're open to information, and the information comes from our parents or guardians. And then as we're growing, we're getting all this information in, our beliefs, our values, and everything we experience, we're gathering in, and including the bad experiences or what we think happened. And then we have, a feeling of rejection. We put that in the rucksack. We have a feeling of not feeling good enough or left out, but we put that in there. So by the time we're 18, 20 years old, we have this thing, this rucksack, I call it, which we carry around with us. And it contains all the good stuff, but all the stuff which can weigh us down. And that's hence the rucksack analogy.
How do you empty the rucksack?
Yeah, how do you empty it? It's a philosophy, the way I look at it is it's a life journey. The brain is a deleting and distorting machine. So, three of us could go out to watch a movie one night and talk about it 6 months later, and we'd all have a different version of that movie because our brains have edited what we saw. So there's a lot of stuff that we don't even know where we've got. It's what it does. It manifests itself in the way we react in situations,
Sure.
or the way we turn up or not show up in situations. So I'm finding stuff about myself. In 2020, I was letting go of this or letting go of that, and recently I found out that I had this sort of feeling of helplessness, which I managed to trace back to childhood. And actually, I was lucky enough to trace it back, and I can see where it impacted in my life over the last 52 years. And yeah.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, helpless. Yeah. It was my parents, they were celebrating their anniversary, and I think I was about 3 years old. And I can still remember looking up at them and thinking, I had this idea that they were going to leave me. I was the firstborn child. They were going to leave, and I think it was because as a young child, you're wandering around, and I must have seen something on TV. I think I equated that. It was one of those wildlife programs, and I remember, so I was 3 or 4 years old, looking at this, and the young were left by the mum and dad, and I just equated that with, this is the time they're going to leave me. And I remember bursting out crying, feeling helpless. And I only pieced that together recently myself, on me. And I thought, wow, that was a big thing for me, guys, because up till 5 years ago, I would go on vacation somewhere, and for the first 24 hours, I would feel anxious. And I just didn't know why. It was always like going to a nice city like Barcelona or over to the States.
Sure.
And I just feel anxious. I didn't know why. But now I know what it was. It was the feeling of helplessness. And I pieced it together. And actually, in the book, it talks about this stick of rock effect. And I think if we all work on ourselves and just carry on working ourselves, we'll find out stuff about ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know why this makes us feel uncomfortable or why we don't show up here. But if we examine it, it's almost freeing when you can suddenly discover, right, okay, so it isn't me. And yeah, that was an example of what happened.
That's super
I'm-
interesting because, you know, you don't think about an insignificant or what would be considered an insignificant, you know, item or happening to a child that can really have a lot of impact on their life. And parents can look at that and go, what's going on? Like, you're being silly. Like, say if they saw you crying on this National Geographic show that you're watching, right? But realizing how much of an impact that actually has on kids, how do adults go back and uncover those things? Because I know that I've talked with different people that are like, I haven't had anything traumatic happen to me. There's nothing that I've experienced that made this stuff come up. But if we're not looking for the right things, how do we dig in and find those seemingly insignificant events that have had some, you know, immense impact on our lives?
That's a great question. And I was talking to a client the other day, and it's quite it was a thing that she has, and she found out that she has a fear of the unknown, a fear of the death, as she put it in the end.
David, I want to make sure that the audience is hearing you. Your mic got a little bit quiet there because this is some important stuff I want to make sure everybody gets.
Yes. I was speaking to a client the other day, and she was talking. She had some anxieties and fears, and we sort of eliminated certain things, and we found out that she had a fear of death, a fear of the unknown and the future. So I think we were maybe talking about COVID. I can't remember. And she then said something to me. She said, "David, I just had this like a flashback of when I was." I remember this when I was 7 years old. I saw my grandmother die. And at the time, it was important to me. But she says, my gut feeling is I carried that forward into the future. So to answer your question, really, you have to do the deep work and the deep stuff, which is either working with a professional,
sure,
say like myself, or in the book, there's every single chapter has exercises which encourages you, because it's specific exercise with questions, for example, to go inwards and answer the question. And what I say was I designed it because I wanted people to read the book and then reread it doing the exercises afterwards. It wants to take too long to read the first time, because it's one of those things, you know, when you watch a good movie and then you watch it again and you see stuff you've missed.
Yeah.
It's like that. But you know, to answer your question as succinctly as possible, we can't change anything about us that we're not aware of, as you quite rightly said. But who's to know that something was like a throwaway comment in the past, Justin, to you, but it actually did stick, but it's deep in your subconscious mind.
Sure.
Our subconscious mind is like an iceberg, isn't it? It's teeny bit on the surface, right underneath that big part under the surface, we can't see. So we don't know what's in there. But what's in there is obviously our memories, our skill sets, our ability to talk, walk, drive. It's like when you drive a car, when you learn to drive, it was like a process you had to learn over and over again. And then 6 years later, you don't think about it. You're just thinking about what you have for dinner that night, you know, and who's driving the effing car. So driving along. So it's so this, whatever's inside you, which could be stopping you from, say, reaching out to people. If somebody might say, I'm really confident, David, but when it comes to networking, I am not confident. You know, I feel anxious, right? Okay, so what happened? You know, so you often find there's something driving, there's an emotion driving their behavior to avoid networking. So it's a case of being bit like a detective going into the subconscious to find out, right, or what is it, or what could it be. You may not even identify the event. That's not really what it's about, but you'll identify the emotion you're trying to avoid, Justin. And that's so key for most people.
Going back to your story, David, you said that for the longest time, when you go on vacation, for the first 24 hours, you have this feeling of helplessness. Now, being the detective that you are now, what causes this helplessness when you go to a different place?
Okay, so this was up till about 5-6 years ago. What caused it was, I remember the first time I went to Florida in '91, and it was to see family in Fort Lauderdale. And we arrived there, and I think I was 22 years old, and I should have been, whoa, happy, and and I was like really uncomfortable. And it was my family we were visiting, and it was boiling hot. It was the summer of '91, and my brothers were excited, but I was not. So I remember going to bed that night, Paul, and I was just lying there in my room thinking, if I could press a red button and get back home, I would press it right now. And I went to bed really upset. And I woke up the next day, and I went in the living room. My mum was there with my auntie, and I said, where are the guys? And they said they're all, because they lived in this apartment complex, so they're all down by the pool and they're enjoying themselves. So I remember going down there, apprehensive, and then I remember, all I can remember is I had the best holiday ever after that. We had so much fun, But the first, as I said, 24 hours, it was really hard. And I think the helplessness was driven by the inability to face anything which was outside the house. I was very, very, almost like tied to my parents. When I went to university, I didn't go far, whereas my brothers did. So I think things happened in childhood which made me very, very homebound. My mentality was I didn't go far. Otherwise, I felt helpless. And I think it all stemmed from the fear, I think, of losing my parents, because I had a couple of dreams. I can remember from my childhood when I was about 13, 14, a couple of dreams where I'd wake up crying because my father had died, or I wake up crying, my mum had died. So that must have been a fear in my subconscious. And I was always the one after that to really celebrate. I'd celebrate their anniversaries after that. It was crazy, and their birthdays. I'd be the one buying the cards. But that was the driver. I think the driver was from the first incident, because these emotions are like, the first domino, that falls and all these dominoes fall. The last domino is the emotion you're feeling right now that you don't want, but there's a history to it. And most people never find out, because it could be something so innocuous, like that. She was early teenage years. She's a dentist now, and she was telling me that someone told her once that she was uninteresting and boring, and that really affected her from the age of whatever it was, 12 years old onwards. She did all she could to appear interesting and nice in conversations,
From one small comment, it's crazy how much that can impact somebody.
She realized, it changed her belief. You see, Justin, that comment then led her to believe, I'm boring, am I? Am I boring? And that was it. And she believed it. You've got a choice at that moment. There's like a pivot moment where you believe it or not. And she believed it. And our beliefs come from our childhood, you see, guys.
Sure. And so I think a lot of that goes into your book, Let It Go, and teaching people to let that go. So give our audience some insight onto how, whenever they do identify that, whether it's a specific incident or it's just the emotion itself, how is the process of letting it go work, and what are some ways that we start that process?
Yeah, it's like you're right. It's a process. There's just not one thing that you have to do. It's an absolute process where you get to the point, Justin, where the penny drops. Suddenly it's like, I am good enough. Because one of the main things hear people say, clients say, is I don't feel good enough. I don't tell anyone, but actually I don't feel good enough inside. I pretend I'm good enough. And I'll say, do you think you're good enough? No, I have to pretend to survive. So the first thing is, here's an exercise for you, for example, to uncover your hidden beliefs or limiting beliefs as they're commonly known. There's an exercise in the book. You spend as long as you want, an hour, half a day, just writing down, free writing, unedited, what you would love to do in life. So it could be, I want to write down, I want a house which I'm going to build. I want to fly first class. I want to ski in Switzerland. I want to write a book. I want to play the piano. All this stuff. So you write down this list, unedited, exactly what you want, not what you think your parents want, or what your wife wants or your husband. What do you really want? And then mull on it. Just let it digest. So not the same day, maybe the next day or 3 days later, revisit it and then write down why you haven't done it. What are the reasons you've given yourself why you haven't done it? And in those reasons, you'll find out some BS that you keep telling yourself. I don't have enough time, or I'm too old, or you'll find out your limiting beliefs which are stopping you. So that's the first thing that we need to do, is find out, well, what am I really thinking underneath?
Yeah.
If you were to give them, say, a hard, fast, actionable tool to try and help let go straight away, how can you let go of something you don't know that exists first? So you've got to go inside first. Open up, it's like a submarine. Open up the hatch and jump in and have a look. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is to actually acknowledge it and say, yeah, this is what I keep telling myself. I keep procrastinating about writing that book because I fear that people won't read it. I fear that it's going to be crap, and who's going to want to. So we've got to think about finding that out. And in the book, then it shows an exercise which is to do with negative thinking, such as blame, complain, judge, criticize, and need for validation. Those are sort of key points. Do you have an elastic band? And for an entire week, every time you blame, complain, judge, criticize, whatever, catch yourself there flicking the elastic band.
I like that. I like that idea.
The brain, and then you're suddenly super aware. Oh my God, I thought I was positive. This is new to me. I've heard so many people say I was the most positive person in the office. I'm not, apparently. So that's the first part of that exercise. The second part is just observe the people around you doing those 5 things. Just observe, but don't flick the elastic band again. Otherwise, you're going to be really sore. So then it's a double whammy, because you're identifying. Hold on, I'm really judgmental. Never thought I was. And hold on, that person I thought was really positive is always blaming. Because when you spend time with people who blame, judge, and all that, they drain your energy. It's like, you feel like exhausted when you want to avoid them. So what you got to think about is, part of letting go could be letting go of who you think are your friends. I've had people who said, I can't let go of that family member, but I can limit my time. So it's not just Justin and Paul, it's not just letting go of stuff that happened in the past. It could be letting go of something that's happening right now, which is affecting your health. It's a whole gamut of effects that we can have. So I've had someone say, wow, David, I didn't know that the WhatsApp group I belonged to was causing me anxiety. But now I'm thinking about it. Every time it pings, I'm like, and I feel, because I don't want to be not liked by these people, I have to stay in the group. So I asked her, why you stay in the group? I feel I need to stay in the group. And number 2, if I leave, they're going to talk about me and bitch about me. So I stay in the group. How many people out there stay in the group because they want to fit in with the crowd? And so she had to let go of that. And she said, well, how am I going to do it? I said, well, what are you losing by being in the group? She said, well, I'm feeling unhappy. I'm losing my time and I'm losing my energy. I thought, great, okay. Here's one word which you can use, and I want you to pop it in a post-it note, because this is actually in the book how I describe it. So on a post-it note, pop the word ruthless. And she said, oh, that sounds a bit heavy, ruthless. I said, yeah, but what are you being ruthless with? And she said, I don't know. I said, you're being ruthless with your time and energy, because and it's going to benefit your health, because if you're feeling anxious by the WhatsApp group. So she said, I'll try it. Anyway, she put the post-it note ruthless. Within the week, she'd left the group. And then I saw her a week later after that. I said, how is life then? Tell me how you feel that it's not pinging. She said, oh God, I feel so relaxed. And she said, if they're real friends, we'll stay in touch through other ways. If they're not, we won't. So that was a process, guys, of letting go, an actual scenario of letting go. Yeah. So it's not just letting go of stuff, it's letting go of anything which is causing you unhappiness, not to feel good enough, not to feel loved, not to feel in balance, should we say, in balance with life. Yeah.
Could you describe your perfect client?
Probably my perfect client is somebody who I was in the past, which is insecure, lacking in confidence, didn't like themselves, felt unloved, and was definitely feeling unworthy. And there's a lot of people out there like that, and I am really drawn to those people because I see what I was in the past. I think, oh no, you can't be allowed to be like that, go through your entire life. And guys, the oldest person I've ever helped was near 80 years old, and she was in the that decade in life. And she came to me because a neighbor said, there's this coach who perhaps can help you. Anyway, so this is quite a few years ago, and she wanted to know why no one liked her. And I felt so sorry for her. She was in the late 70s, almost 80 years old. And it transpired that she was behaving in such a way over the years that it put people off her, but it was a defensive way of being. And it was all from her childhood. She said she had a really bad childhood and she was angry. I think her father died. Her mother didn't bring her up the right way. And she became an angry woman. And because of that, even when she got married, she was snarly at the neighbors, didn't trust anyone. And because of that, she didn't know who she was. She didn't know how she was behaving. All she knew is she didn't have any friends. And we did work together, and she did change. It was amazing, actually. It was 2-3 months along those lines. And she did come to me for one of the latter sessions and said, David, I'm having nice conversations with people. I can't believe it. And then she said to me, I wish I'd met you years ago. I said, I wasn't around years ago. Wow.
That's pretty amazing. But it seems like that is a theme for the coaches that we've talked to out there, that their number one client is them 5-10 years ago. It's like, because they're like, I don't want anyone else to go through this, what I went through, the struggles that I went through, the beliefs and values I had that didn't benefit me or anyone around me. I need to help spread some information so people can get out of that. And I think Paul and I have had plenty of conversations, and that seems to be an overarching theme with the coaches or consultants that we talk to, that their main client is them years ago. So it's not a new thing for us to hear. Also, what you brought up about distancing the people in your lives, because it's, Paul and I on a regular basis talk about, adding positive, removing negative things. And sometimes that's conversation with friends and family. And that's always a tough thing for people to approach. Like, well, how do I tell my mom I'm going to speak to her less because of the conversations that we have? How do I build those boundaries, healthy boundaries between the friends that I have, because the conversations that we're having are negatively impacting me? What have you seen is, like, how do people struggle with that, and how do they get to where they accept it and acknowledge that there are those people in their life that they need to put that distance between? Because I know you saw it there with the WhatsApp thing, but is that a common thing, or do you get a lot of resistance from your clients?
No, it's a common thing, to be honest, Justin. Let it go is really a form of release. You release from anything. And I have people saying, yeah, but it's my mum.
Mhm.
My mum is draining the F out of me. And what we'll explain is, we have an emotional blueprint, and it's a result of everything that's ever happened to us. And it's a combination of thoughts and feelings. It's who we are or who we become. Can we change it? Yeah, 100%. I mean, I talk about neuroplasticity in the book, which is how the brain, science has shown the brain can change. You can learn a new language at the age of 70, no problems.
Sure.
And so people say, well, how am I going to cope with my mum? And I say, well, first thing is, you have to think about, unless, the extreme where you don't talk to your mum anymore, you just have to limit the time. You're going to have to really be ruthless. And it is being ruthless with your health, of body and mind, because I think health is the number one value for me, body and mind. We have to, because if we can't operate at that level, we're not being ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
So they'll say, well, what do I do? I said, well, you're going to have to think about how you limit your time, exposure to your mum, because it's hurting you. It's causing you pain. That's the first thing they realize. And they have to think about that then. Because you can't force anyone to do anything. You can just give them a little bit of light to show. And secondly, then, which is often a game changer, is when you explain the blueprint to a person like that, your mum, now she's only behaving and acting and reacting like she is because of her past. She's got a story which she's playing to. You're the latest part of the story, but she was brought up by her mum and dad, whoever brought her up, who were brought up by their mum and dad. So the beliefs are filtered down. You may not actually know what happened to your mum to cause her to behave like that around you. And therefore, you're going to have to forgive her. You're really going to have to think about forgiveness. If you've got brothers and sisters who she's not berating, she's not behaving like this, but she's towards you, you're taking it personally because you may represent something in her life that she can't cope with.
Mm-hmm.
So it's education then, in this instance, Justin. It's education. That person has an aha moment when they realize it's not personal. And that is something that once they get round to, it's not personal. No, it's not personal. You just represent something that's they don't like. And this person might be strong, resilient, and feisty, and to the mum doesn't like it, doesn't like feisty, resilient, but recognize that in her daughter, therefore she bangs on her daughter's head, whereas the other ones are more subservient, you're not. So it's, things like that can really, really help a person move on.
Yeah, I'll have to say, David, it struck a chord with me, and I think I saw Paul realize that it did as well, because even the way you described it, I have put boundaries on my relationship with my mom because of the way that the conversations that we have, and I know it's because of her negative relationship with my father and how much I remind her of my father. And so it's a constant battle that every time she interacts with me, for her, that, like you said, that story comes up. Oh, here he is again. And I even remember as a kid her saying, "You're just like your father." And I would say, "Thank you." And it just made her, infuriated. And so, growing up, I'm like, hey, this is this is not something that I need in my life. And so there was a distance there that I had to create. And a lot of people don't understand that. Like other people are like, well, how could you distance yourself from a family member like that? And when you realize that you have to take care of yourself first before you can take care of the people around you, that's when you realize what has to be done. And being ruthless, it may seem like that, and it's a harsh thing, but when you have to take care of yourself, so there's others. I mean, taking care of my daughter and my spouse and the people around me, that's more important than continuing to have this negative conversation with this person. So it struck home with me, David, the way you described it, almost exactly how it occurred in my life. So I appreciate that there. And so I got to share a little bit. But Paul, I know you had a question.
Your theme is about overcoming fears, and I listened to a podcast that you were on recently, and you were talking about your own fears about speaking. And I know that's very important for coaches, to get their message across is speaking. And you kind of touched on it a moment ago, saying that wasn't something that I was strong at. Can you tell us kind of how that all started and what you did to overcome that?
Yeah, of course. I can take you through my journey, if I may. As a little child, I was very vivacious and very outgoing, and I became a very I was a mild-mannered teenager, but I was shy, and I guess I would never wanted to stand out. Just didn't want to stand out, and I know why, because obviously I was a different color to the people at my school, and I'd been bullied, and the last thing I want to do is stand out. So when I got to university, I didn't want to stand out there. And when things like we had to do dissertation and stand up in front of the whole class in university, my heart was pounding. It was really going. I was having a panic attack. And it's an accepted fact that the biggest phobia on this planet, actual phobia, is public speaking, actually. Because in public speaking, you have the fear of being laughed at, the fear of not being good enough, the fear of failure, the fear of looking stupid, fear of not sounding good, all those. In one place, you've got all these fears, multiple fears stacked up. So when I first started speaking, actually the first night of the first engagement I had, I actually woke up in the early hours, 2:00 in the morning, and the door, my front door was banging. So I thought I'll get out of bed, and then I realized it wasn't banging. That was my heart. My heart was going crazy, and there's this pounding in my head, and I was having a panic attack, and I was going on stage the next day to speak about mental health and mindset. I had worked myself up into a state of anxiety so much that I gave myself a panic attack, and I knew I was having one. And when I did go up on stage, I wasn't good. I was just focused on survival, not thriving, survival, and my amygdala was firing off like crazy, and my reticular activating system, the brain was like going, just trying to survive. And then I made a decision, though. It's not going to stop me. And I had to have a serious think, a conversation with myself. Why do I want to speak? And the overriding reason was the message. I've got a message. I want to spread that message of what we're talking about tonight. Release, let go. And whenever I went on stage or did a workshop after that, I would get nervous, but I would say the message, what are you here for? The message. And that would distract me and override the fears. And then I started, getting better and better and better, to the point where, when I can do a day event and speak for 7 hours without any notes. So I would obviously we'd have lunch break,
sure.
But we're allowed a lunch break, but I can speak now and confidently, because I know the stuff and I love sharing the message. Just like, when you hear a great song or you eat some great food, you can't wait to tell someone. Or you watch a great movie, you can't wait to tell someone. I'm like that. I really want people to get this idea that you can just release ourselves, even from, the story of, I often like to tell is that one of my clients, she was with three of her best friends from school. They're all in their 50s having dinner, and the host for 3 hours just blamed, complained, judged, and bitched about her ex-husband. They were divorced for 27 years. She's still talking about it. So where's she living in the past? And what happened? She drained everybody's energy, because she hadn't let go. And it's a case of, if you don't let go, you've just literally handcuffed yourself to that person who's hurt you. Of course, at the time, it hurts. There's got to be a time when we have to release ourselves from something. And it's not just past, guys. It's also the future.
Mm-hmm.
I talk about in the book that some people lie there at night obsessing about what's going to happen in the future. Is he going to turn up at the altar? Am I going to get that interview? Am I going to get that job? And we overthink the future. So how about letting go of that? So yeah, it's
some great advice, David. Some amazing stuff you're talking about, man. I think a lot of value for the audience out there. What projects are you working on right now? You working on another book, or what are the main things that you're focused on right now, David?
Yeah, I'm getting ideas for the next book. I'd like to bring that out in a couple of years. I'm doing as much online speaking as possible.
Sure.
So I'm just speaking to people everywhere and anywhere, and I'm using this year to focus on the book, get the message out there, get as many people as possible to read it, help themselves, because we're in a dark time or a challenging time in history where people are looking for help anyway and change. So that's my major focus this year. Everything is tied around this project.
Sure.
And helping people really. Yeah.
Well, how can people get a hold of you, David?
Instagram. I'm on Instagram, David_Rahman. My website is david-rahman.com. I'm on Facebook, Blind Coach, and LinkedIn, David Rahman. Yeah.
Perfect. We'll put all the information down in the show notes so everybody can get a hold of you. We like to wrap up our show with the idea of the topic of our show in mind, actions and limits. What would you say is the number one action that people can implement that can make a huge difference right now in their lives?
I think at this time especially, just ask yourself the question, what could I be grateful for right now? Every morning, what could I be grateful for right now? It just gets your brain to start thinking about possibilities and thankfulness. Yeah, that's a big thing.
Super simple, right? You just wake up and be grateful. I know Paul loves that. Paul talks about that a lot, about being grateful. So
that's what I use with my clients too. The same exact thing. I tell them that every time.
Yeah, brilliant.
It's great. It's a piece of great advice. Yeah. So the other side, David, and you talked about it a little bit, these limiting beliefs that we impose on ourselves. What would you say is the most prevalent one that you've seen that we need to make sure that we get rid of immediately?
I'm not worthy. May I share a tool?
Go ahead.
Just look in the mirror and just say to yourself these three things. I love you, I value you, I respect you. And do that every day for about 2-3 minutes in the morning, 2-3 minutes in the evening, lunchtime possible. Just keep doing it for 100 days. See what happens.
I like it. Great advice, David. Thank you so much for coming on the show, man. A lot of great value for the audience. We really appreciate having you here on the Actions Limits podcast, David.
It's a pleasure.
Well, David was such a great guest. I'm glad that he came on the show. It seemed like a lot of the stuff he was sharing is stuff we talked about before. I think we were on the same page. As far as a lot of the content that he talks about, and man, a lot of great info for our audience.
You know what makes a great coach is when he starts talking and we're interviewing him, we start thinking about our own lives. And I think that's what happened with you, Justin, that he hit a chord with you and it met pretty much the story and you could connect with it. So you know that he's a good coach. Just that alone.
Yeah, he definitely, you could hear it in him. He cares about, his clients, and he wants to, change their lives and prevent them from dealing with whatever pain that is that they're dealing with. I was interested, we should have gone into it because it almost like he borders that line of therapy versus coaching, right? Like it seems like he's leaning more on the therapy side more than the coaching, but which isn't a bad thing. It's just everyone has a slightly different take on it. But like you said, he's really able to get down to what's the root cause of what's going on and helping people uncover that so they can let go of that, emotional, rucksack, as he puts it, that they're carrying around with them for weeks, years, decades. So a lot of great info. Glad that he came on the show, man.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot. Yeah, but getting back to your point about therapy, you got to be careful with that. If you don't have your licenses to be a therapist, you can't portray yourself as a therapist. So there's a fine line there for sure.
Yeah. We should have gone into that with David and see where he falls on that. But I know we've had that conversation on the show multiple times with different therapists, licensed therapists, and coaches that have come on. So, but sometimes there is a little bit of that overlap there that falls back and forth. But let's go ahead and wrap up the show with another segment of Ask Paul Anything. For all of our listeners out there, make sure you're continuing to send your questions into actionsandlimits@gmail.com to get your question featured here on the show. Paul, this question comes in from Leslie in Nevada, and she says, Paul, what is something that you just recently realized that you are embarrassed you didn't realize earlier?
That's an excellent question. That I recently, I think for me that I have noticed it, but I think to the forefront, it's coming to life more, is I need to be more organized. I'm a guy about how I got ideas. I want to get it done, efficiency, this and that. But there's times where I need to step back a second and get organized and get everything in a good pattern, because I'm always about, it would drive me crazy. And when I was, doing the mortgage industry, and I'd be in the call center, and there would be somebody next to me. And before she would get on the phone, she would spend 20 minutes like getting her highlighters and everything just so, and it would drive me nuts. Like, get on the phone. We're supposed to get calls, and you're just sitting there, getting everything organized. But there was a method to her madness, and I think that I need to back up a little bit and have a little bit of that organization, and not just go full force.
Sure.
Pull back a bit. Yeah.
That sounds a little bit more on the OCD side, what was happening over there with your coworker, but I get what you're saying. Being organized, it definitely helps your mental state, right? Like when you get everything, functioning right, when your house is clean, you're in a better mood. You're like, okay, I can focus on what's going on. So definitely something I think everybody could do better with. So great question. Thank you for sending it in. Again, continue to send your questions into the show to get them featured on our segment, Ask Paul Anything. Another great show, Paul. Glad David came on. Glad that we got connected and we were able to check out his book and all of his content. So I know that, our listeners and our viewers out there got a lot from what David had to share.
Absolutely. For Just an Afternoon, this is Paul Fortune. We'll see you next week.
All right. See you next Monday. Thank you for listening to the show. Don't miss an episode. Click and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform, and find us on Instagram and Facebook under Actions and Limits to stay updated on all our upcoming content. Continue to email the show at actionsandlimits@gmail.com for our segment Ask Paul Anything. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.